Hello, I'm Richard Burton, watercolourist on the Yorkshire coast here at Bempton, and I want to show you today some techniques to capture water. Have you been frustrated with your water, being able to paint water and trying to capture water and reflections? Well, this is the channel for you, and we'll show you how to, with some relatively straightforward steps, but following those steps will really capture reflective and shallow water, and that's something that really is magical in watercolour. So that's something. We're going to Castle Howard today, which is near York, famous for television series like Brideshead Revisited. It's a wonderful location, and this is a photograph I took a photograph early in the year, and it really does capture just what we're wanting to do. But before we start that, mustn't forget, we've been working on this for some time. This is our free watercolour guide. If you're new to watercolour or you're just coming back to watercolour, grab yourself a copy. It'll help you. There's some simple steps in there. It's useful to sort of really get you started again. So there's a copy of that. It's in the link below. So just click on, and that's something yours to use. It's a free resource. Please use it. Give it a try. Let me know how you get on. However, in the meantime, back to the water. Let's get on. Let's get into it. Okay, so this is the picture of Castle Howard that we're going to tackle. It's the big expanse of water in front of the house. The house is in the distance, so the majority of this painting is water. So we're going to have a 1/3, 2/3 composition. So I'm going to put the horizon line, which is effectively the edge of the water, first, and then build in some detail where the house is, and then cascade round to this lake, put suggestions of the reeds and the foreground, just to be able to ensure that I capture enough of the detail, but really is quite loose and quite simple. And then when I've done that, I'm going to make a point of putting some masking fluid just to capture the highlights, which are going to be up against the darks, and particularly the flowers in the foreground, some of the reeds and some of the reflections in the water. Okay, so now we're going to start with the painting. The first thing I need to establish really is where we're going to start, and to me, I'm going to deal with the majority. Is going to be the water to start off with, and it's going to be the underwash of water. Now what I've done is I've already mixed some colours, and I've got on my palette I've got what I call a colour story, which is really the laying out the colours in the order that I'm going to apply them onto the painting. So I've got that clear understanding. I'm going to start with the blues, and then I'm going to start moving to some purple, and then I've got some greens that I put in place, and then I've got finished off with some yellow ochres at the bottom. What I'm actually trying to achieve is this initial wash on the water. Now we've done this before. The thing about the water is it wants to be layered, so we're going to layer it, and the first layer is that underwash, which just captures the reflective nature of the water, but in this case it's also going to capture the see-through water where we look through into the base of the lake, which is going to be crucial. So hence we've got that colour change where you're not just a blue, but you're going to bring it down from the blue into a slight purple, down to a green, and then finish off with that yellow ochre in the foreground. That is crucial. Now the thing about this, it has to be done on a moist surface. So I'm going to wet the paper first, make sure that that area of water is wet, so the paper is wet, and then let it soak in, and then start with a cobalt blue. Just bring that down with a cobalt blue. Then into that I'm going to add in some purple, probably some purple lake if you like, just into that cobalt blue, which will just transition that colour, but it's quite pale as it comes down. As you bring that further down, it gets a little bit toned stronger as it comes forward, and then I'm going to use some green, add some green. So now in this case I'm going to use cobalt turquoise, cadmium yellow, and a little bit of yellow ochre just to give me some green that will just drop into there. I'm going to bring this down. As I come down again further, I'm then going to drop in some yellow ochre into that mix, and that will then, alongside a little bit of cadmium yellow, will finish off the foreground. That will be the first wash. Now while that is soaking in, I'm then going to mix some purple, which is going to be purple with the cobalt blue, back to those again, and then I'm going to drift in just some soft brush marks just to give that hint of purple drift, which will just give that, not only will it give the feeling of movement in the water, but it will just give that hint of looking through the water into the base of the painting. And then as I come down, I'm going to bring that down, make it stronger, add a little bit more purple into the mix, make it a little bit stronger, and then add it into the green and add it into the brown. And the key here is that because it's a key colour, it will change colour as it comes down, and it will transition, and it will give a dark and a flowing look to, and a diffused look to the water itself. And just do it carefully. You will end up with a transitional wash that comes down the paper, but you'll have these purple overlays on top, which will just be diffused, but they will just have some shape to them, and that will be a lovely starting point for us to then do the rest of the water. But what we do now is just let that dry. Now, as a quick tip, what you could do instead of embarking straight on the water is to practice it. Get a little bit of A4 paper, a decent size bit, and just practice that technique of painting onto dry paper with these colours, and just perfect it a couple of times before you start on the main picture, because you'll suddenly get a feel for being able to paint onto moisture, and it's better if you can do it on a bit of a scrap piece just to practice it. Okay, so now we're going to deal with the sky. The sky is going to be a combination of cobalt blue and then a little bit of alizarin crimson, just to create this sort of purple, light purple, distant glow above the house itself. And that's all going to be done on the moist. So I'm going to just bring that down. I'm going to paint that gradually from top to bottom, and just as I come towards the house, I just add that little bit of very pale purple and just simply drop that in, and again let that dry. So now we're going to deal with the distance, which is basically the house itself of Castle Howard, and then that grass in front of it and the woodland to the left. So we're going to start with mixing a cobalt blue and a light red, or a Venetian red if you've got something similar to that, which will just provide a light grey. And I'm going to put that light grey into the house, build up the shape, build up the texture. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow ochre or raw sienna onto the face of the house, just to give that little bit of warmth. And as the paints soak in, I will mix a little bit stronger shadow colour, the similar two colours, and just drop those in just to give a suggestion of detail. Alongside doing the house, I'm also going to do the water reflections of the house itself, and those are going to be started with a warm tone first, which will be the raw sienna yellow ochre, and then into that I'll just drop in horizontal brush strokes. I'm going to drop the feeling of the shadows into the water. So now we're going to deal with the trees, particularly the background trees. And these are going to be a combination of cobalt turquoise, cadmium yellow, and a little bit of yellow ochre, just to give that feeling of a lighter green initially. I'm going to drop that in across the piece, just changing it in parts because there's a little bit of redness there. So I'm going to use a little bit of burnt sienna just to give one or two of them a little bit of difference. And then when those trees are in place, I'm then going to use some darker combination of cobalt turquoise, bit of burnt sienna, and probably a bit of ultramarine blue, and just make a little bit of a dark, and use a little bit of alizarin crimson as well, just to give some further depth to the dark, and just drop that in around the trees to give them some shape and texture. But be mindful, they are in the distance, so they don't want to be too strong. They're a middle tone, and just keep that soft and just create that shape. And then I've got this overhanging tree, which is going to be a case of using some dry brush techniques, which is going to be a case of scratching the brush, side of the brush, onto the surface of the paper, so you get a little broken edge to your marks. And that is going to be a green, which is going to be cobalt turquoise and raw umber, which just put that on and create some foliage effects. And then in between the foliage effects, I'm going to make a darker woodland for the branches, which are going to be ultramarine blue and burnt umber, and just drop those in between using a small brush. So now we're coming to the middle distance and foreground area, where we're going to put the reeds in, we're going to put the grass, and we want to capture that really using, particularly the reeds to start off with, a light mix of light red and a little bit of alizarin crimson. And if you need to just cool it off, just use a little bit of cobalt blue because it's in the distance, but just lightly put those in to give that feel. And then I'm going to make a green. The green is going to be a bit of a stronger mix of cobalt turquoise and lemon yellow, and a little bit of raw umber, just to give that feeling of brighter green. Drop that in and use that a little bit brighter green in the foreground as well, to give those sort of foreground grasses, which are just coming in to the picture on the left hand side. And then while that's settling in, I'm going to mix some darker colour, which is going to be a sort of an ultramarine blue, burnt umber, and a little bit of crimson, to make a purple shadow colour, which I'm going to drop into the water to make my first feeling of those reflective nature of the reeds in the water. Now I want to go back to the reflections from the trees and the house, and I'm going to mix a light green, but firstly I want to wet the paper so that I bring the wetness of the paper down just sufficiently to the edge of the reflections, because we're going to have a diffused look to the reflections, and then you're going to have a small brush that just touches off the reflections with ripples onto dry paper. So there's a little bit of combination there, just a bit of care here. And then we're going to start with a lighter green and then drop in some dark into that green just to create that feeling of depth into the reflections. And just with a brush stroke, just gently drop those in. It wants to be done again onto the moist or damp paper, not wet, otherwise it will just diffuse away. So carefully do that. And then once you've got the water reflections in, I'm just going to look at the trees in the background and just give them a little bit more body. So I'm going to mix a bit more dark just to drop into there, with a combination of cobalt blue, burnt umber and alizarin crimson, just to give that feeling of depth. Okay, so now we're dealing with the middle distance and the foreground. We're going to put the shadows and the reflections in the water. And where the reeds are in that middle section, we need to make a suitable dark grey that's got some transparent colour in it. So I'm going to use cobalt blue, burnt umber and a little bit of alizarin crimson to make a purple grey that I'm just going to drop in there to try and emphasise those vertical reflections. And then as I come down on the left side, I'm going to wet the paper, just the water, just wet the paper a touch, just so that the surface of the water is moist. And then I'm going to mix another grey into that with a little bit of ultramarine blue, burnt umber and alizarin crimson to make a deeper dark that I can then float into that area onto the moist surface. And I'm just going to gradually float it in. This provides shadow, the reflective shadow that's just cascading on the surface of the water from the grass bank and some of the vegetation that's just out of the picture on the left hand side. The key here is to just drop them in and just let them diffuse, and you bring that down into the foreground. And as you bring it into the foreground, you just make those colours, that strength of dark, just that little bit darker, so that it just carries and gets some depth into the picture. We're now going to darken the reed area just as it comes into the water, just to give some strength into that cooler dark area with a little bit more of the earlier grey that we made, which was ultramarine blue, burnt umber and alizarin crimson. Just drop that in, it'll just give some gravity to that area, and that will hopefully just give that little bit more three-dimensional feel. And I'm also going to come down here and add some dark and shape and darker green into the grass areas in the left hand side, so that we get some more strength into that as well. And I'm also going to utilise some brighter green as well in there, just to make it bounce back at me and just give me a little bit more strength as well. Now it's a case of letting it dry. In this case, I've let the majority of it dry on its own, but I'm just going to finish it off with the hairdryer just to get that final bit of moisture out. And then I'm going to remove the masking fluid, and this is done by simply rubbing my hand on the surface of the paper as quickly as possible, and it should pop off. If it doesn't, just use a rubber just to help tease off that masking fluid, so that will reveal the white flowers and the grasses. Now all that's left is to tidy up the flowers. I'm going to use my craft knife just to tidy up the shape of the flowers and some of the little stems that are just overhanging the water. And I'm also going to use a little bit of Chinese white just to bring in a few of the leaves and branches that are just missing, just to give it final touches. And that hopefully should be about it. Okay, so there we have it, the final picture. I'll put a mount around it as I usually do, just to show it off. And as you can see, I think we've caught that water as we wanted. It's an interesting one because we've got that shallow water and then we've got the deeper water. So we've had a trip to Castle Howard, and I'm rather pleased with the result. So the key there though, the key takeaway is we broke it down into simple steps, small steps. Those small steps, when you put them together, you can get a desired effect. An interesting point, we did this water first, the sky and the water first, and we put those underwashes in onto a moist surface. It's all about understanding the wetness of the paper, which is crucial. And then once you get the feel for being able to paint on that damp surface, you can transition from one colour to another quite comfortably and quite easily. But it's just that case of practicing that feel. And then obviously we then put in the rest of the picture in, and then we put those reflections, and then we put the shadows onto the water itself again for this final touch. But it's just those steps, break it into key steps, and it comes out with something really effective. So if you like that, please do remember to like and subscribe, and that's really important because it gets it touched to a wider audience. And as I said last week, we are in a great position. I mean, I really do appreciate everybody that's followed these videos. I mean, we've got 2,500 subscribers now, and that's really massive, and it really helps us a lot to be able to get these videos out. And also in the description below, don't forget, there's our free watercolor guide. If you're coming back to watercolor, or you're just trying it for the first time, grab a copy. It's all free and it's for you to enjoy. And as I say, I've been painting for 30 years, and it really is exciting for me to be able to show a whole wider audience my techniques for being able to paint. And I do feel though, if you can master these techniques and these simple techniques, you can do a whole raft of paintings, and your paintings will come on enormously. It will make such a difference, and obviously it brings you enthusiasm, because I've got massive enthusiasm for watercolor, and I'm sure if you follow these techniques, you'll have that enthusiasm too, which is part of the magic really. And it's something that we're hopefully going to be on a journey together. Oh, finally, something that we've been working on for some time. We're also working on an online course, which we'll tell you more about as we get nearer the time. But it's something for beginners or those coming back to watercolor. It's really an exciting project, and that's something that just to keep your eye on. And we'll tell you more about it as we go forward, as we get nearer time to the launching that. In the meantime, all I've got to say for now is to enjoy and keep painting.